Hi, my name's Tom. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm working on a 2012 Ford Escape. My customer is a wholesaler. He buys cars at the auction and he resells them at the auction after he repairs them. This particular car, his complaint was no second gear. So I've road tested it. I've verified that he has no third gear and no fifth gear. He has good reverse, first, second, fourth and sixth. Everything's working except third and fifth. So today we're gonna turn up the heat and we're gonna figure this out. Okay, so after the road test, I scanned the car for codes and that kind of thing. And his complaint was a PO756, which is a shift solenoid B performance stuck off. Now, what he initially wanted me to do was throw a solenoid in it. Well, I told him no. This code could be a problem with a valve body, with the clutches slipping. It could be anything like that. So we're gonna have to figure this out. I'm hoping it's just a valve body problem, because I don't want to pull this transmission. Well, but yeah, really, I won't pull the transmission. Somebody else will. So let's get a multimeter out and let's go after this code. We have other codes too, including a P0301, which is a cylinder misfire, cylinder one misfire. A P733 gear ratio error in third, P2701 transmission friction element B applying time. And the only thing we don't care about is the misfire. He'll take care of that somehow. So let's get started. Let's go get a voltmeter and figure out what's going on. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the transmission side of the engine control module. On terminal 50, the blue and green wire, is our solenoid power. Now that supplies solenoid or power to all the solenoids, not just this shift solenoid B. Because this thing shifts, that's going to be okay. That power is getting to the transmission. We're still concerned about it. But shift solenoid B is on pin 43, a green and brown wire. This supplies the ground to turn that solenoid on. But in this particular case, the transmission doesn't just turn that ground on. It pulses that ground and varies the voltage when this solenoid is on. So we won't see a good ground there. We'll see a little bit higher voltage than a normal on-off type solenoid. The pulse width modulation, they use it to control the pressure when the solenoid's actuated. The longer they keep it on, the more or less pressure, depending on how the solenoid is plumbed. So let's go over to the car, find those two terminals, and do a couple little tests. Okay, here we are at the car. I hope that you can hear me. I've got my voltmeter, and I've got the ground hooked to the ground on the battery, and we're going to find these terminals. We're looking for number 43 and number 50. Now Ford, this thing's right out here in the front, and this says 50, so let's check that. That's our solenoid power. There should be battery voltage there. We've got 14.5, so that's good. That's what the alternator's putting out. The next one is number 43. It is the connector, or the wire for the control of the solenoid. And right now the solenoid should be on. Wow, that's hard to see. Okay, so that's 46. Let me get closer with my eyeballs. Yeah, that's 46, and that's 35. So we'll count backwards from 46, 45, 43. So there's 46, 45, 44. And here's our green wire that is our solenoid control. Now, right now the solenoid's on because we're in park. Let me see if I can get this pin in there. But what you see here is we have 10 volts. Now, we should have 0 volts if this were a normally on-off solenoid. But this solenoid is being pulsed. The ground is being pulsed so that it can control, you know, how much pressure it leaves through. So I'm going to go in the car and we're going to take the voltmeter in there with us. I'm going to put it in reverse, and you'll see that when I do that, I should have 14 volts here because the computer has taken away the ground. So the voltage is passing down the wire out of terminal number 50 through the solenoid and back to here as 14 volts because it's not grounded. Hang on, we're going to go in. Okay, we're in the car. We're still connected. I couldn't get that thing all the way in. So I'm in park and the ground is being pulsed. So we've got 9 volts instead of 0. It's not a problem. This is what it should look like. Now I'm going to change it to reverse. And we're back up to our battery voltage, which is the alternator voltage of 14.43. That's good. What this tells me is the wiring through the solenoid from the computer through the solenoid and back to the computer is good. Now, we're going to do a couple other tests, and I'll explain those in a minute. Okay, so I have this all set up. I am in terminal 50 and 43, and we're going to measure the resistance on the ohms on the resistance scale of my meter here, and then we're going to check some other solenoids and see if they compare. I'm going to clip one of these, and these probes are made for this. This is how I check pin tension. So I know, never front probe, you'll damage. That's true. All right, let's see what we got. So our shift solenoid B, which is our problem, has 5.3. Let's move this to a different shift solenoid. It's hard to do one-handed. That should be shift solenoid D, 5.3. We'll do them all. All these are variable force. They're a little low. 5.3 and 5.3. So all 4 of the solenoids in that row are the same, relatively the same. So this is a good test because if this solenoid was bad internally, sometimes it'll be so different. Like instead of 5.2, I might have 25 or 120, whatever. And that's a good indication. But in general, I don't believe that resistance is a good check. But here's what we know. Let me tell you what we know. Okay, here's what we know. I know it's cold out here. But what we know is the wiring from the computer to the transmission and back to the computer is good. We know the solenoids all have the same resistance. So is it, the solenoid could still be a mechanical problem, internal. Doesn't have to be an electrical problem with the solenoid. If it's stuck, it'll give this code. But here's another clue. We've got a good solid reverse. This solenoid is used for 3 and 5 in reverse. So the next thing we need to do is check the pressure. Fortunately, this transmission, this 6F35, which is very similar to the 6040
from Ford, or I'm sorry, General Motors. But this one has pressure ports for each clutch, which is awesome. So what we're going to do, we're going to back probe the we're going to back probe the control wire of the shift solenoid B, and we're going to put a pressure transducer on the 3.5 reverse circuit, and we're going to take this thing for a ride. And we're really, I really am hoping to see no pressure. If there's pressure, then there's something wrong inside the transmission. But if there is no pressure, there's something wrong with the valve body. So I'm going to go get some circuit diagrams for this, and we'll look over them real quick. I'm not going to go into great detail. There's a lot of detail, but I'll show you.
So these are the hydraulic diagrams for third and fifth, and for reverse. Now we're going to look at these real quick. So what happens in this one is that the line pressure solenoid sends the fluid to the manual valve that is selected drive. It passes through the manual valve, through this clutch control bypass, and then through this TCC regulator down here, and then there's a check ball here. Let me show you. This check ball, when the fluid's coming this way, this ball is sealing off this port here. Now there might be a little bit of leakage there, but it's sealing this off. And then that directs the oil down here through the 3.5 regulator. And also some of that oil goes to the 3.5 reverse latch valve. So it goes through this, passes here, up here, over to the 3.5 clutch, and the pressure applies the 3.5 clutch. So let's look at reverse. In reverse, the line pressure comes in a different part of the manual valve because you've moved it, and it comes in here. It goes through a different portion of this clutch control bypass valve. It follows this path, and then here is that check ball again. So what happens in this case is that check ball is forced this direction, and it seals off this part of the valve train. So, and then it comes down through and does the same thing. It goes through this valve, it moves this valve, and the 3.5 reverse latch valve. These two valves are in both third and reverse and fifth. Passes through here, and it applies that clutch. So what we have here, this is the shuttle valve. Really, it moves moves one way and the other, keeps fluid from one direction or the other, or it passes fluid one direction or the other. There's a possibility that this is stuck, and it might be stuck in the reverse position, which would block off. If it's in the reverse position, this ball would be stuck up here, and it would block off the 3.5. And I think that's what we're going to go after. I don't think we have a solenoid problem. I think this might be a pretty quick fix. So this is the last test for this Ford Escape. This is going to lead us whether we're going to fix the valve body or fix the transmission or replace it. What I'm doing here is I got a pressure transducer on the 3.5 reverse pressure port on this 6F50 transmission. And I've got a back probe in the solenoid control. We're going to look and see when it shifts into third, because that's where our problem is, if the solenoid is going off and if the pressure is going up in the circuit. We're hoping for no pressure, because that would mean that I want to take transmission out, or somebody wants it. So hang on. So here's our snap-on 500 psi transducer plugged into the 3.5 reverse circuit. underneath the car. The GM version of this, the 6240, it doesn't give you these pressure plates. This is a very nice feature that makes diagnosis much easier. This is adaptable, so I can use these transducers with my cocktail scope. And over here, I've got probed into the transducer connector for the PCM. We're in terminal 43, which is the shift solenoid B control. Now, this controller sends out 12 volts to the solenoid assembly, and we're looking for a ground. And in this case, the ground would be pulse width because it has a variable force solenoid. And when the solenoid's off, we'll be looking for 14 volts. So here's the octal scope that we're using, and then here's our scope screen. All right, so the orange line is this solenoid control. What you're seeing is the solenoid's pulse width modulated because it uses a variable force solenoid. So it looks like a big line. It's dropping down to 0, back up to about 14. And the green line is our pressure. Now, right now the solenoid is on. So if I put it in reverse, it turns the solenoid off. And we should get a straight line. And you can see that the green line goes up and cleans up. And I can make it go up with pressure. So we're looking at the pressure, and the solenoid is off. So we're gonna take it for a ride, and we're gonna see what happens. What I'm looking for is to find out whether when the solenoid turns off like it is now, if my pressure here, this is basically the 0 line, and I'm running probably about 100 psi on the line. But when I go to 0, it's picking up all kinds of interference, so that's no big deal. So let's take it for a spin. So what we want to look for, in third gear, the solenoid should turn off and return to 12 volts, or 14 volts because the engine's running. And when it does that, it goes to that 14 volts with a steady line because the computer is no longer, oh boy, we may not even make it. The computer is no longer grounding that solenoid, so the 12 volts coming through the solenoid is what's there. So let's see what happens. The road's all uphill. Oh, there it was. Let's do it one more time. Oh, there it is. Solenoid's off. There's no pressure. There. All right. So this was the result of the road test. The pattern here is a pulse width modulated solenoid. This is on the control side. The computer grounds this solenoid just for a short period of time and turns it back on to control how much it opens and closes. Now once that solenoid turns off, we get source voltage.
because there's no longer a ground, we're going to see source voltage at the PCM. And this is our pressure. Now, here the pressure was 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. However, at this point, when it goes to shift into third gear, this should raise up to about 100 and shift when it shifts. And as long as it's in third gear or fifth gear, it should remain there while this solenoid is off. That's because this is a normally high solenoid, so it's going to be pulled low. So that tells us that the valve body isn't sending the signal to the 3/4 clutch to apply. It's not sending the pressure there, it's not sending the fluid there. So we need to take the valve body off and see what's going on. Today I'm back on the escape. Today I'm going to pull the valve body and we're going to take it apart. I've got the fluid draining. Next we'll have to get up here and get this connector out and then take this pan off. It's not a big deal. This particular Ford gives you lots of room. I've got the cover off, and now I'm going to disconnect that connector at the top and this connector. The connector at the top is for the manual valve, or the transmission range sensor basically. And this connector here is for the output speed sensor. And we're going to take some of these bolts out and pull this off. That's your output speed sensor. This one's going to be a bugger. Well, that transmission range sensor, I had to use both hands. I couldn't video it. I had to do it from the top. Okay, there it is. It's out, valve body. There are 22 screws and one nut. The screws are 2 different lengths, but that's not a big deal. They're raised bosses on the valve body for, you'll be able to tell. And a gasket. No big deal. Okay, I think I've just discovered our problem. Right away. Hang tight, I'm gonna get a light. So these 2 screws are out of here. All right, I loosened them up. And then this is our stuck check ball. And it actually goes here on the actual main part of the valve body. This is the solenoid body. And it goes in this hole here. It is actually blown through the plate. And it's kind of third and reverse uses this. Third pushes it one way and reverse pushes it the other. I believe it's stuck in the reverse direction, and that's what our problem is here. I'm going to do a little bit more circuit tracing, and then I'll let you know. So the little Ford Escape is done. I didn't get a chance to film the rest of the repair because there was a lot of stuff going on here that day that I was doing that, and there was no way I could film. So I reassembled the valve body with a new plate and put it back in the transmission, torqued it down to the right specs, put the cover on, filled it up with fluid, and took it for a drive. It had all the gears. It had third and fifth that they were missing before, and it was a good repair. So my customer has already picked it up. He's happy. He's paid his money. taking it back to the auction with a fixed transmission. How about that? I want to thank you all for watching, and if you like this, if you don't like this, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, subscribe, complain in the comment section, or whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter to me. But thank you for watching, and we're going to start something else new.